Hello and welcome back to Workflow Runbooks. In the last video, we talked a little bit about runbooks. We created a runbook that actually interacted with Azure resources to switch off machines. We looked at leveraging webhooks to do some more actions, two-way communication. Something happens to an Azure resource, you want to call the automation on the back of it. When we were looking at the runbook types, there was the workflow runbook. Now, I think workflow runbook is quite important and useful for any IT administrator. And the reason I say that is because when you create runbooks that are quite, long in nature of their execution, and something fails midway through the runbook, you don't need to and want to go through the same process step by step again. You really want to be able to recover from that failure point to execute rest of the stuff. Now, workflow runbooks allow you to create a checkpoint within your runbook, and the checkpoint preserves the values of all the assets as well as the state of the runbook at that point in time. And then all the executions thereon are executed based on the values persisted at the point of checkpoint. So we'll do a brief demo of the functionality of workflow runbooks in which we will set up a checkpoint just to show you how the workflow would work. So let me flip into Azure portal. So we're within the Azure portal now. As you can see, I'm back into the runbook section. I will click on add a runbook. And when I click add a runbook, I get the option to create a new runbook. I'm going to select the option PowerShell workflow. Now, let's call it IAC training dash workflow runbook demo. Okay, click create. Now, behind the scenes, it's creating a new runbook and just setting up the environment for me to start coding away my workflow runbook. Now, while this is happening in the background, I want to show you the script that I'm going to use for the purposes of the demo. Now, really, what I'm doing here is I am using a variable, and I'm setting a value for it. And then I will print the value of that variable before the checkpoint. At this point, I'm going to take a checkpoint, which means all the values of those variables will be persisted. After this point, I'm going to change the value of the variable, and I'm going to cause an exception, just force an exception. In this case, I'm doing a 1 plus ABC, which is obviously going to fail. Now, when the script gets suspended, I have the option of resuming the script because I have a checkpoint workflow here. And at this point, the script should only execute from this point onward. So it shouldn't print before checkpoint. It should only print after checkpoint. And it should have the updated value of the variable. Simple enough, right? But it kind of proves the point of the checkpoint workflow type runbook. So let's copy this across into our workflow runbook. As you can see here, I am setting an automation variable, which kind of means that I need to have a variable called suspended in place already. And I've set the variable up. As you can see, if I click refresh here, I've created a variable called suspended, and it's by default got a value of true. So if I come here, I'm setting the value to false. So let's just write the output of that. Let's call it variable value. Now, this is going to print before checkpoint. This is where we'll snapshot the values of the variables. At this point, it will print after checkpoint. At this point, it's going to get the value of the variable again. So let's put in another output statement to print the value of the variable. Okay. And because the value of the variable will be false, it will go within this condition. And at this point, the value will be updated, the exception would be raised, and the script should just fail. So let's save this and click on test pane. Now, when I come to the test pane, it gives me the option to start the script. Now, as I said earlier as well, when you test these scripts, an isolated environment is provisioned for you, which can take a little bit of time. So in essence, it might take 5 to 7 minutes for the first script execution to complete. So let's click start. And as you can see, it's submitting, it's queued the job. So we'll wait for it to spin up the environment and run the execution. As you can see, the script execution has completed, and as expected, it's failed. No surprise. And if we see the value of false is what we'd assigned to the variable. And remember, when I was setting up the variable, I'd set it up with a value of true. And then it printed before checkpoint, after checkpoint, and then false. So if I go back to the variable now and refresh it, uh, you know, that was the default value that was set up here. Um, and the best thing to do at this point would be to resume the execution of the script. Now that the value of the variable is false, next time it executes, it shouldn't go in the if block and just complete the execution. But the point we're trying to make here is that the checkpoint has preserved the updated value, and so the onwards execution just takes that from that point onwards. So what we'll do is click resume the execution of the script. We will just start the execution from the checkpoint. This would take about 5 more minutes to complete. And you're probably wondering at this point why, in spite of clicking resume, nothing's happening on the screen. It's just the way the testing screen works. It doesn't remove the current output. It's actually behind the scenes queued the request. It's just not started executing yet, so that's why you see the previous error message. But if I was going to click resume again, then it would just error out saying you've already resumed a failed task and you can't re-resume because it's not completed execution yet. So we'll just wait for 3-4 minutes for the test environment to just start executing from that point onwards. As you can see now on your screen, the status is updated, so it's saying resuming right at the top here, but the error message from the last failure still stays, so it can be a little bit confusing for certain people, but it's just the implementation of how it is. Excellent. So virtual high five. As you can see, the output continues from after checkpoint. So the before checkpoint doesn't get reprinted, which kind of proves that the checkpoint state worked, the updated variable value reflects, and the runbook successfully completed. So as you can see here, checkpoint workflow is a good friend of yours, especially if you're writing long-running runbooks that have a lot of steps in them that rerunning would take a lot or would kind of expect a certain state which, if changed, could cause issues in your runbook. So use checkpoints. They're really useful.